Thank you all for joining us this morning. Just wanted to give you an update on the governor's leadership team on homelessness. I know that there has been some questions about whether the team has been disbanded or not. I just want to make it very clear that we continue to meet. We're not meeting regularly. It's really on an as needed basis as issues come up. We have gone through, and we did want to give you an update on the situation in Kaka'ako, as that really has been top of mind for many. Just wanted to thank the city and county and the federal partners and state partners. I do believe, and we can all, I think we all recognize that the program in Kaka'ako really went well, as we had expected. A bigger challenge, I think, then I think it's just a testament to when we work together and we pool our resources, we can be successful in moving forward. Just a few numbers to put things in context. More than half, 158 of the individuals that were identified in the data assessment at Kaka'ako have been placed into shelter, and that includes 25 families, which represents 54% of the total population, and 80% of the families have been placed into shelters. So they definitely are off the streets in a better situation, where we are in position to provide them services that will help us move them permanently out of the state of homelessness. I just really want to reiterate that this is an effort, and I do believe that the success really is because of the state, county, and federal government and legislators being willing to make it a priority and make sure that we can work together to make progress in Kaka'ako. And with that, I just wanted to ask Roy Aminia, representing the mayor, to kind of give his perspective on that activity. Roy?
Thank you, Governor. Yeah, I'd just like to echo what the governor said. This was a team effort. It involved all the agencies that he mentioned. As you know, there were different property jurisdictions, HCDA, OHA, Kamehameha schools, and with this enforcement action, we were able to bring together all the appropriate parties, in addition to the service providers, which included not just human service providers, but also agencies such as the Humane Society and others. So the Sheriff's Department, the Police Department, everybody came together. I think you folks were out there almost every day during the enforcement, and you, I think, witnessed the fact that it not just went execution-wise without a hitch, but also we kept it so that it was not only not violent, but also that the homeless persons that their dignity was maintained. So we congratulate the governor for convening the homeless leadership team. We continue to want it to thrive, because this is just the first step in this statewide crisis. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, do you want to give comments on the HCD Kaka'ako update?
Thank you, Governor. I just want to echo that I really believe this was a team approach. State, city and county government, federal leaders, and our nonprofit service providers really coming together to collectively address the encampment in Kaka'ako, Makai. our service providers continue to assertively outreach to homeless individuals and families throughout the island, utilizing the same approach that we use in Kaka'ako, working together with other government agencies and continuing to offer access to shelter, permanent housing, and other resources. So again, I think this is a model that we hope to replicate not just across Oahu, but across every county throughout our state. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also just wanted to announce today as the next step going forward, as we have been saying from the very beginning that homelessness is a statewide issue and that we will continue to take lessons learned in Kaka'ako and apply them as appropriate into each and every county. I will be issuing an emergency proclamation because after our review of existing provider contracts, we have come to the end of what we can do within the existing contracts. We've identified resources that the state can make available to the service providers in providing homeless services across the state. And we believe that it's necessary to issue the proclamation so that we can expand those contracts and add additional monies so that we can continue to expand the effort statewide. We recognize that this homelessness challenge is a crisis. There continue to be homeless. They've spread out in the Kaka'ako area, and we at the last press conference had talked about the fact that we were expanding data collection efforts to Waianae, Wahiwa, and Waimanalo. And so the emergency proclamation allows us to expand the contracts. We also will be looking at establishing a shelter for families. As you are aware, we are making sure that we have options for those who are homeless to move into an emergency shelter. And the biggest deficit in the system is shelter space for families. So the emergency proclamation would allow us to stand up shelters for families in an expeditious manner. We've discussed the sites that we are looking at, although we haven't made a final decision about what specific specific site. We are looking at the 4 sites that have been previously identified, which is the Liliha Civic Center, Lot I, the HCDA maintenance shed by the Kaka'ako Waterfront Park, or the Nimitz Pier 38 site. Again, we're looking at something in the urban area to deal with the increasing homeless situation throughout Honolulu. We also are working with the Hawaii Association of Realtors. The city and the state are working. As you know, we do have vouchers that we have available for rental assistance and support services. And we do not have any rental assistance housing to place the individuals with vouchers. So the city, state, and the federal partners here will be working together with the Realtors Association so we can provide some information for landlords so they can understand what the benefits of participating is. I know that there are concerns about or some stigma attached to some of the voucher programs, and we just want to provide as much information as we can to realtors and landlords so that they can understand the benefits of participating. And I think most importantly, this builds the capacity within the state for us to get people into a permanent situation with wraparound services. So with that, I'll throw it open to any specific questions that you might have.
Governor, in Kaka'ako, there were many coastal citizens living there, many families from Coca Nations. And there was still a bit of confusion last week in terms of the understanding the process of getting into shelters and what they could bring. What's being done specifically to reach out to COPA families to make sure that they're able to settle here in Hawaii successfully and move into housing?
Well, besides just the specific focus in Kaka'ako, I have been meeting with the governments of the nations involved, the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, to see how we can do a better job of preparing those who choose to immigrate to Hawaii about what the requirements are. So we have begun the dialogue to see what point of access we might be able to do, how we might be able to work with the governments there to better prepare those who choose to migrate to Hawaii so that they can get the documents, they can get the kit that they need that would allow them to be able to access services more directly. You know, as you are aware, with the help of our congressional delegation, there is funding for an organization now, We Are Oceania, who really is helping us to facilitate the migrants who are already here and allow us to better focus and deliver services. Thanks to our congressional partners, for those who have already migrated here. We continue to work with We Are Oceania and have all the state, county, federal departments work with them to do a better job of outreach once the migrants are here. And then again, I am talking with the governments and seeing how we can cooperate and work more, making them aware of what the situation is for some of the migrants. You know, just want to reiterate that some migrants do assimilate and perform and integrate into our community very well, and some don't. And you know, we do know that we want to make an effort to assure each and every migrant the opportunity to be successful.
Just following up on that, are there enough interpreters at this time employed by the state and city to assist in the outreach efforts?
Well, I think that we have a challenge in identifying interpreters. I think that is the same situation with every migrant group, in every group of immigrants. We always have a challenge in trying to provide interpretive services. And that's some of the things that we are discussing with We Are Oceania in terms of trying to identify those immigrants that can provide those kinds of services who are already here. And again, in our conversations with the government entities, trying to see how they can help us get more qualified translators and interpreters here. Yep. Yes. Yes.
Hi, Rachel Wong, DHS. I'm trying to just answer your question. You know, DHS, we have our limited English proficiency program. LEP and DOH has their OLA program. And we all continue to work with folks in the community to really be able to increase access to make sure we're meeting all requirements. So if we look at just specifically what we're doing with the transition of the connector to a state marketplace using federal technology, with the state taking over the functions, working very closely with the connector and their management and their navigators and MAO programs to make sure that we are working with communities and members.
Governor, can you talk a little bit more about the emergency proclamation?
Sure.
Is there money involved? What specifically will it do?
Yes, there is money involved. As I said, when we examined the contracts for the service providers statewide, we have extended and expanded them as much as we can within the existing law. And so that definitely was one of the primary reasons for issuing the emergency proclamation. It would allow us to extend those contracts, and it would allow us to take resources and dollars we've already identified and be able to put into those contracts so we can continue to provide services with the existing service providers. As part of that, so the plan is to extend the service contracts to June 30th of next year. July 30th of next year, I guess 31st, end of July of 2016. And that would allow us the opportunity to evaluate service providers and to really look at the contracts and how they're shaped and gets us ready to really have a vigorous, competitive environment for service providers in the next round as we continue our focus on providing homelessness services.
And you talk,
Governor,
I'm sorry.
Governor, you talked about the financial aspect, limitations of the contracts. What else can you highlight or give us examples of that have provided some limitations in those contracts that you would like to either adjust or change in the next contract?
Well, I can turn that one over to Scott or Rachel. I do think a couple of things just off the top, and then I'll really let Scott talk specifically. But there were some of the ways that the contract was structured about how they receive payment and what the criteria was for payment. I think part of the previous contract was based on limited staff resources, and I think part of what we want to do is, now that we have a better idea about how these service providers can be more efficient and effective in helping us deal with the homelessness challenge, then we want to make sure that the next round of contracts, really do focus on those measurable things about trying to keep people moving through the pipeline of getting them off the streets into an emergency shelter, into short-term rapid rehousing programs, and then ultimately we want to get them into a stable and final placement. But Scott or Rachel.
So to just clarify a little bit about the funding that will be impacted by the emergency proclamation, the state has identified a little over $1.3 million that we would like to put immediately out into the community through these various contracts statewide. Particularly, they'll be focused on contracts that assist homeless individuals and families to get quickly into permanent housing, into private rental units. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's our goal, to have homeless individuals and families be better able to transition into permanent housing. The types of services that will be increasing through this funding are our contracts for Housing First, including an expansion of the Housing First program to the neighbor islands. We'll also be increasing the level of funding for our housing placement program, which provides first month's rent or security deposit assistance for homeless families with minor children, as well as for our state homeless emergency grant program, which assists both those who are currently homeless as well as individuals and families that are at immediate risk of homelessness, with a payment either for past due rent or for first month's rent and deposit. As far as evaluating our existing services contracted for by the state, as we continue to get needs assessment data that's collected by our homeless service providers, we're learning more about what strategies are most effective in helping to transition some of these individuals and families more quickly through our shelter system. We're also learning more about where sort of the needs are in our shelter system. As the governor mentioned, one of the deficits in our system that's been highlighted is the lack of shelter space, particularly for families with young children. We are also learning more as we talk to providers and homeless individuals in the community about some of the barriers that prevent individuals and families now from accessing some of our current shelters. So that will be part of the evaluation as we look at our existing contracts.
So it sounds like that dovetails with your outreach to landlords and landlords, property managers. Can you talk about the outreach a little bit? Is there going to be like a meeting? Is there going to be a media campaign?
So both the state and the city actually have been working closely with the Hawaii Association of Realtors over the past few months. And we, part of that is we really understand the importance, again, of trying to link individuals and families who are homeless into permanent housing to private rental units. We do know that there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of misperception and misunderstanding about the homeless population. And we're working with the Association of Realtors to really better educate local landlords and property managers about some of these misperceptions, as well as the services that our homeless service providers can offer. In both our Housing First program as well as the Housing Placement program, there is a case management component included, which really is to build a relationship with the landlord to provide support for them. If there are issues that come up with the tenant after the person is accepted into housing, the service provider is there to assist with that, to both provide assistance to the family as well as to the landlord. Our intention is, through this partnership that we formed with the Hawaii Association of Realtors, that we will be holding a landlord summit before the end of the year to really assist again with the education and continued outreach to landlords and property managers throughout Hawaii.
Governor, earlier on, you said that you're going to be applying the lessons learned from Kaka'ako in your campaigns moving forward. What were those lessons?
Well, I think it's a couple of things about really starting with data, having a data-driven process, understanding what the homeless population in an area is and what the makeup of what the income might be. And I think most importantly, what kinds of services they would need. And so that's where it starts. And then it's really about looking at the continuum of shelter requirements, assuring that we have a space with service providers to get them off the street, making the system work. So ensuring that we have space in rapid rehousing programs, and then ultimately, as Scott had said, working with the realtors to get them into a permanent housing situation. So it's really getting the system to flow, to work people through at each step, leveraging the city, county, federal, state partners and the resources so that we can maximize the opportunity and benefit that we all will receive as a community when we coordinate and focus the resources available at all levels of government.
Anything to add, Scott, on that?
I think also, we're learning about, again, some of the perceived barriers to shelter, such as the hours of shelter operation, some of the documentation that's involved, and to some individuals and families that can create barriers. So again, as we're reviewing our existing state contracts, those are things that we're taking into consideration.
I think one of the best lessons learned, is that when the city, federal, and state leaders can work together, that we definitely can be more systemic and focused on addressing the problem, and we can see rapid improvement in the situation.
Proof's in the pudding with the coordination on those multiple levels, obviously, and what would happen at Kaka'ako. But if this is still an existing emergency situation warranting a proclamation of such, how then does the committee decide to meet, and what warrants a situation to have everyone get back together again?
I think that there's a general agreement amongst the leadership team that we will meet as needed. As I said, emergency proclamation was a result of us looking at the needs and what the situation is and what specific action we would be taking. As we collect data on Waianae, Wahiawa, Waimanalo, we'll be taking action on those things. As I had announced at the previous meeting, I have been in contact with the mayors in the other counties, and Scott will be going out and outreaching and talking with them about the lessons learned here. As you heard, one of the primary reasons for the emergency proclamation is so that we can expand the contracts statewide, so we can begin to get service providers and work through, again, what we learned in Kaka'ako and apply it in each and every county.
Governor, you said about half of the 158 in the area have gone to shelters. As far as you know at this point, where have the other half gone?
Well, we do know that some of them have moved into other parks, in Kaka'ako, and some of them we see appearing elsewhere. I think that we know that we're not going to get 100% success with every homeless person, but I do think that those homeless in Kaka'ako are fully aware now of what their options are, of what the service providers are, as Scott and Roy had mentioned, that we are learning a lot as we proceed through this. The county, in terms of enforcement, as they are implementing their programs to expand shelter availability, they're identifying some of the barriers and challenges. I think one of the best parts of the leadership team is that we are learning together, and that once something that the county learns or the federal government partners are learning, it's being shared, and we all benefit from that sharing of information. So, we do know that it's not a quick fix or a panacea that suddenly homelessness will disappear. It is still a state of emergency in the sense that there are thousands of our members in our community that continue to be homeless, and that we are applying lessons learned to make a bigger impact.
Governor, your outreach or your message to the landlords, is it going to be the same as the Housing First model on the mainland? Wraparound social services, guaranteed monthly income, extra deposits, somebody to call, all that? Or is there something new that's trying here?
I think it's, modeled after what's worked in other communities, but we also know that the level of service really differs depending on, the subset of the homeless population that we're dealing with. From the data, we know that, there's a percentage that really needs that more intensive continued housing subsidy, as well as intensive case management and wraparound support. But there are other segments of the homeless population that are homeless primarily due to economic factors, have a lower level of need, and don't require as intensive level of services. So I think that's part of the education to the landlords, is explain, well, what we're already currently offering through our housing placement program, targeted at families, that families don't need as deep a level of subsidy. Sometimes it's just the help with that initial hurdle of getting into the unit with the first month's rent or the deposit, and then having caseworker, to be a liaison between the family and the landlord for the next year while they're housed. That person can provide that follow-up and supportive services on both ends. So I think it's really modeling, what's worked in other communities, but what we know is working and is effective here in Hawaii through some of our existing providers. So I think that's really what we're trying to do through the partnership with the Association of Realtors.
Are you seeing any backlash at this point in that area? I mean, we heard up to this point about the damage, physical damage in the area, the pipes broken, cars being keyed after certain incidents, the PCs. Have you seen any backlash at this point? And I would imagine the next step still is to fix a lot of those problems physically.
I mean, we are working with all the landlords. We do know that the situation in Kaka'ako was not a good one. And now that we've been through the program, and we have gotten to the point that Kaka'ako, and we will be consistently enforcing through that area, we do have the opportunity to go back, and all the property owners have the opportunity to go back and fix issues and correct challenges that have been created by the homeless encampment.
Governor, it seems like there's a subset of the homeless population that really just doesn't want to go into shelters, specifically the ones that are in Kaka'ako Waterfront Park at the moment. They've already been reached out to. They already know their options, but yet they're still there. What is the plan, I guess, for that?
Well, I mean, I think we will continue to work with that. As Scott had said, one of the lessons learned, and we continue to learn, is trying to understand why is it that they choose to be homeless rather than moving to a shelter. Some of them have pets that not allowed. Some of the shelters have rules that they don't want to comply with. So I think as we move forward and as we look at the next round of contracts, then we would be looking to provide and reduce the barriers in as many of these areas as we can. We have learned that fighting homelessness is almost on a case-by-case basis. Each individual who finds himself homeless has a unique set of challenges, and we need to put together a package of services that meets their needs. And as I said, all of the partners, I think, are learning as we work through the process. we all share what we learn to really make the next iteration of services and efforts even better. And we will continue to do that as we proceed through.
Governor, what's the level of security again? I think you mentioned it before, but was there a couple of 24-hour security guards? I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there is, but
What's now, Scott?
So the sheriff's department is providing additional, detail in the Kaka'ako-Makai area, at least for, the immediate period, just to provide maintenance, following the clearing of the encampment. I believe that, city and county is also doing maintenance efforts in the area also to check to make sure that the area remains clear.
So as far as the number of bodies, I guess you say, that are there on a regular basis, I don't know if it's 24/7, they have maybe 2 sheriff's deputies, or what is the situation right now as far as the?
I believe that there was additional sheriff's detail provided. I can get specific information and
Later.
follow up.
Scott, or Governor, I heard from service provider that there's been a recent state rule change that would accelerate people moving out of transitional housing. Is that accurate, or if so, can you explain that to me?
Well, one of the things that, we're looking at as we again evaluate all of our existing contracts is how can we accelerate the time that it takes for an individual or family to move through our shelter system. I think ultimately the goal is to move individuals and families into permanent housing as quickly as possible. So we're working together, with our providers to see, well, how can we best support our shelters to help make that happen. One of the things that we did ask our providers of the rental assistance programs to do in early September was to prioritize their payments for rental assistance to individuals and families who are currently residing in emergency or transitional shelters to help them more quickly exit shelters into private rental housing.
Any other questions?
any final questions?
I have a couple of other questions, not really specifically to this, if you have time.
Okay, well, I
I'll do
will.
it after, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you all, and thank you to the leadership team.
Thank you.